Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video. I was over the moon when my wife told me she had a surprise for me at our honeymoon destination. We had saved up for months to afford a luxurious honeymoon in Hawaii, and I couldn't wait to see what she had in store for us to make this special trip even more special. As soon as we arrived, I noticed that my wife was on her phone a lot. She seemed to be texting someone, which I thought was odd, but I didn't pay much attention to it. It could have just been her letting her parents know that we had safely landed and were on our way to our hotel. We got to our hotel room, which was beautiful and spacious. I couldn't believe my wife and I would be spending the next few weeks here in Hawaii together, free from stress and worries. I grabbed my wife and gave her a big hug, which is when I noticed that she felt really tense. I asked her what was wrong, and that's when she told me that the big surprise was on its way. She told me to turn around and close my eyes. I followed her instructions, excited about what she had planned for us. I heard footsteps approaching our hotel room, and my wife opened the door. The next thing I knew, the hotel room was filled with voices and laughter, and my wife asked me to turn around and open my eyes. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My wife's entire friend group was standing in the room in front of the bed I was sitting on. All 5 of them were giggling and congratulating us on our marriage. They were dressed up and had been spending the last hours at a bar since they seemed to be at least a bit tipsy. I pulled my wife to the side to ask her what all this was about. As it turned out, my wife had invited her entire friend group to come along on our honeymoon. Not only that, but they also expected me to pay for everything. I was shocked and furious. I had saved up for months to afford a honeymoon for just the 2 of us, and now my wife had ruined it. I did not want to spend this special vacation with 5 extra people that I didn't like or even know well, let alone pay for all 5 of them. I asked my wife to go on a little walk with me. When we were finally alone again, I confronted her about her friends tagging along without talking to me about it first. I was really mad, but I tried to control my anger and simply let my wife know that I was not happy with the situation and it was up to her to figure out how to fix this. But she didn't seem to understand my perspective. She tried to convince me that her friends would not be an issue at all and that we would still be having the honeymoon that we had dreamed about. I didn't want any major arguments and issues to come up so early on in our marriage, so I decided to be as understanding and compromising as I could. I told her that I was willing to give this thing a try, under the condition that my wife and I would be having our privacy and that her friends would not interfere with our planned activities and trips. I was not sure I would even be able to pay for everyone if I wanted to, but I decided not to argue about this at this point and let everything play out. Since my wife and I had just arrived and had a long flight behind us, we decided to go to bed so we would be rested and ready for the next day when we had planned to hike together. The next day, however, turned out to be a disaster. My wife's friends would not accept that my wife and I would be going on the hike by ourselves and insisted on coming with us. I took my wife aside and reminded her of our agreement. She had promised me that everything would go according to plan and that her friends would not bother us. But it was like my wife had completely forgotten about her promise, and she was now switching sides. Her friends were pressuring her into coming along, and it seemed like my wife was more concerned about having a good time with her friends than respecting our marriage and the plans we had made together. I felt helpless and alone. After a day of trying to make the best of the situation, I realized that I couldn't do it anymore. I calmly told my wife that I couldn't continue the honeymoon with her and her friends. I told her to enjoy her marriage with her friends instead of me and packed my bags. She was shocked and tried to convince me to stay, but there was nothing she could do to change my mind. I left the hotel the same day and decided to look for a hotel in the area so I could enjoy a peaceful vacation by myself. I spent the next few days enjoying a solo trip in Hawaii, trying to forget the embarrassment and betrayal I felt. I even met a couple of other solo travelers, and we had a great time exploring the island together. This was not how I had imagined my honeymoon to turn out, but at least I now had peace. I missed my wife and the experiences we could have had together, but there was no way that I was going to spend the honeymoon with her friends and pay for everyone. AITA? Days later, my wife called me. I was hesitant to answer at first because I had been hurt so deeply by her decision to invite her friends that I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what she had to say. But I decided to listen, and she explained that it wasn't her idea to bring her friends along on our honeymoon. Her friends had been jealous of our good relationship for a while. Now that we were getting married and going on a luxurious honeymoon, they were making her feel bad and guilt-tripping her into inviting them on the honeymoon. She had felt pressed to bring them along, even though she knew this would put a lot of financial stress on me as well as take away from our privacy. She had spent the last few days overthinking her decisions and had concluded that she was in the wrong. She apologized for what happened and asked my forgiveness. She also let me know that her friends had left as soon as they realized that nobody would be paying for their trip. I had a feeling that they had thought I was making a lot more money than I actually did, and that it would be no big deal for me to cover everybody's expenses. It took me a while to process what she had told me. I still felt hurt and betrayed, but part of me understood where she was coming from. My wife had a hard time saying no to people, especially when it came to her friends. She said that she had tried to stand up to her friends, but they had manipulated her and made her feel guilty for wanting to spend time alone with me. She apologized profusely and begged me to come back to her so we could try to salvage our honeymoon. I eventually agreed to talk with her more about what happened and went back to the hotel we had booked for our honeymoon, where my wife was still staying. My wife continued to explain to me that her friends had been pressuring her for weeks to bring them along on our honeymoon. She admitted that she had made a mistake by not discussing it with me first and that she regretted it. She also acknowledged that she had not been holding up her end of our agreement to keep her friends from interfering with our plans. She had realized that her friends were not real friends, and they were just trying to use her to get a free vacation. I felt bad for my wife at this point. I could tell that she was genuinely remorseful and wanted to make things right. As she was talking, I realized that I still loved my wife and that I didn't want our marriage to end over this. I decided to give her another chance, but with certain conditions. I made it clear that if we were going to continue our honeymoon together, there would be no more surprises. The next few days were tense, but my wife did her best to make it up to me. She made sure that we had plenty of alone time, and she even organized a romantic dinner on the beach for just the two of us. I started to feel like maybe we could salvage our honeymoon after all. But then, just as things were starting to look up, we received some shocking news. One of my wife's friends had been diagnosed with COVID-19. We were all staying in the same hotel room, which meant that we were all at risk of contracting the virus. We immediately went into quarantine, which meant that we were stuck in our hotel room for most of the rest of our honeymoon. My wife was devastated, and so was I. We had been looking forward to this trip for so long, and now it had been completely ruined for a second time. But as we spent more time together in quarantine, we began to reconnect in a way that we hadn't in a long time. We talked about our hopes and dreams, and we remembered why we had fallen in love in the first place. We started to make plans for the future, like where we wanted to live and what we wanted to do with our lives together. By the time our quarantine was over, I realized that maybe our ruined honeymoon had been a blessing in disguise. It brought us closer together and reminded us of what was important in life. My wife and I spent the few days that we had left of our honeymoon exploring the island, trying new foods and enjoying each other's company. It wasn't perfect and there was still some lingering issues, but we were able to work through them together. NTA. I think it was important for the husband to stand up for himself and not let his wife's actions ruin his honeymoon. But it was also important for him to forgive her and work through the issue together. Communication and compromise are key in any relationship. NTA. Your wife is completely out of line. A honeymoon is supposed to be a special time for the newlyweds, not a vacation with friends. And to invite them along without even discussing it with you first is incredibly disrespectful. You were very understanding and compromising, and your wife and her friends still managed to ruin your honeymoon. You did the right thing by leaving and enjoying a solo trip. I hope you and your wife can work through this, but she needs to understand that what she did was not okay. I'm glad that the story had a happy ending and that the husband and wife were able to work through their issues. It shows that even when things seem bleak, it's possible to find a way forward and come out stronger on the other side. ESH. While your wife should have discussed the idea of her friends joining your honeymoon with you before inviting them, you could have handled the situation better. Leaving her alone on the honeymoon is a bit extreme. You should have tried to talk it out and come to a compromise instead of just storming out. Understandably, you were upset, but leaving her to spend the honeymoon alone with her friends is not the solution. I, 26, female, and my fiance, 27, female, moved into a house over the summer. We are quite happy with the house and have one cat. My cat is not a huge fan of dogs, as we adopted her from the shelter, and her previous owners had large dogs that were not friendly towards her. If a dog is outside and she sees one through the window, she will hiss until it passes. Friends respect our wishes on not wanting dogs brought to our house. My parents have two small yappy dogs, and they always bring them when they visit. She will hide in our bedroom and will come out when they have left. My sister, 29, female, and her husband are staying with my parents and are bringing their two dogs, a German Shepherd and a Husky. Neither dog have been around cats. My parents are having their kitchen remodeled, and my fiancé offered to host Christmas at our house. My sister texted asking if she could bring her dogs over to the house. I replied back to let her know that our cat was not okay with dogs, and we would prefer if they didn't bring them. My parents are not bringing their dogs. My sister argued that the shepherd had anxiety and did not like being separated from her. She suggested putting our cat in the bedroom, and I told her that I was not changing my mind. She's upset and blames me for ruining the holiday over a cat. My parents think that I should compromise and put my cat in our bedroom for one day. My fiancé just wants to have a nice holiday with the family and doesn't want any stress. I'm getting it from both my sister, brother-in-law, and my parents. NTA. Why is her dog more important than your cat? Why are her needs more important than yours? You replied that you said you prefer them not to bring the dogs. If that is what you said, next time be blunter. No, they ask again. No, that doesn't work for us. Also, my friend had a cat who was similar with dogs. They got talked into letting the dogs come and the cat stay in the room. The cat scratched at the door the entire time the dog was there, meowed, tried to get the paw under the door. After an hour, my friend told their family they needed to leave or remove the dog. Family did, but not without saying, "It's only a cat, it will be fine." When they left, the cat could smell the dog and really didn't like it and ended up spraying in the room. Cat never did this before. Point is, it's your house, your cat, your rules. If they are okay with the dogs being crated and in the garage and you're okay with that, offer it. NTA at all. I would not welcome two large dogs with high natural prey drives in my home with smaller pets, especially if one or more have separation anxiety. Both of her dogs will be just fine in a boarding facility. If it's acceptable to you, maybe the dogs could be the ones locked in a garage, but if they are used to the separation anxiety being reinforced by never having to ever be alone, your garage will probably be destroyed. One of my 46 female kids is gender fluid and prefers they, them pronouns. They're biologically female, but aren't comfortable identifying as such. I apologize if this is hard to read. I know it can be hard to use they instead of she. My kid is 16 and goes to a private school where there are a lot of less students. It's a therapy school for kids who need extra help. My kid goes there because they were bullied a lot in public school and some other personal issues. They're in a class of only 7 other people, and one of their classmates, Abigail, fake name, has gotten super attached to them. Abigail has mild autism, and because of that, doesn't have many people she's close to. She and my kid became friends, and I was talking with her mom, who told me that Abigail lost all her friends in the past by being too clingy, and she still hasn't learned what's acceptable and what's not. My kid went to her house twice to hang out, but Abigail invites them out almost every day. My kid usually makes an excuse as to why they can't hang out, and I do feel bad for this girl since she's very lonely. But both times they went to her house, my kid came back exhausted and said that Abigail is a nice person but doesn't understand boundaries at all. Apparently, Abigail keeps holding on to them and only stops when my kid tells her to let go firmly. She also apparently cries at school every time my kid isn't paying attention to her. They told me once that a month back, they were in art class with their friends sitting in the back of the room. Abigail apparently asked if she could sit with them, and my kid and their friend said it was okay. But 5 minutes later, Abigail ran out of the room crying. When my kid asked her why later that day, she apologized and said it was because she felt left out of the conversation my kid and their friend were having. A few days ago, Abigail's mom called me and asked if we could organize something where Abigail and my kid could hang out one-on-one. I asked my kid how they felt about this, and they told me they have been very stressed out lately and don't want to have to talk to Abigail at this time. I told them that it was okay and they didn't have to do anything they weren't comfortable with. But my husband overheard and told them that they're being selfish by not seeing Abigail. Then he got mad at me and is now calling us both selfish. I'm starting to think that he's right. Abigail is a lonely girl who needs friends. I don't know what to think. NTA. Oof, I feel for this autistic girl and her struggle, but your child is not a toy. They have their own thoughts and feelings, and also this really awesome thing called bodily autonomy. I really hope Abigail can get to a place where she doesn't make others uncomfortable, or at least find somebody who is comfortable with her the way she is. The reality is that your kid has made it clear that person will not be them, and no one can force them to change that. NTA, your kid doesn't owe anyone their energy or their space. Abigail needs to learn that kids can spend time with other people too. I can't make any assumptions on what she does and doesn't know. Running away and crying whenever kid talks to someone else seems manipulative. I gotta ask though, had anyone told Abigail these things? Hey, can you not do that, please? I don't like people grabbing me like that. It makes me uncomfortable. And as such. I'm neurodivergent myself, and while I try my best to follow social cues and respect boundaries, sometimes if nobody tells me what I'm doing wrong, I pretty much won't connect the dots. While I can offer no solutions to this problem, the only advice I can offer is for your kid to go at their own pace with this. They are not obligated to bend over backwards to try and accommodate for Abigail's needs. And as trans dude here, please take out the biological female out of the post. It's not our business. It's usually private information. Just saying, 16NB is fine. But I love that you are supportive. NTA, your child is entitled to set boundaries. I feel for poor Abigail, but her loneliness and neediness does not entitle her to violate your child's physical and emotional space. As long as your child is not bullying Abigail and remains kind in their limited contact, this is not something you as a parent need to or should interfere with. Your child has eloquently expressed that they find being with Abigail to be stressful and exhausting. This is detrimental to your child's mental health. You are doing the right thing in protecting your child and supporting them.